Hi guys, I'm Tinette and welcome to my channel. In today's video we're going to be painting March, which is part of the Indigenous calendar set. So this is the calendar that I designed and made myself, so if you're interested in this you can buy it on my website. I'm using my Winston & Newton and my Daler paint today. I have my size 4 and size 3 Princeton Aqua Elite paintbrushes, my painting cloth and a glass of water. I'm also going to be using my handmade metallic golden bronze brown color to do my wording with March. So let's jump in. I'm very excited about this flower. It's a beautiful pink flower. So we're going to start mixing those colors. I'm going to be using my yellows and my pinks for this flower, and then the stem of the flower is more like maroon, dark maroon, burnt umber kind of color, so we're going to be working with that as well. I'm going to paint with my big paintbrush, so this is the size 4. So I am wetting the paintbrush. I paint the area, the first petal first with water. So now this is an interesting petal because it kind of, this one and that one flows, they're all flowing into each other, so we try and do them all at once, but we also don't want them to bleed in the middle. So I'm going to keep the middle clean, and then once this is wet I'm going to add in my color, and I just want to have a very light subtle pink glow. It's not a dark harsh color, and we're trying to keep it soft as possible, and by also just not using just pink, we want to add in some yellows. So I'm going to add in a tiny bit of my yellow, and it starts from the center and it just bleeds into the pink, and I'll let the water just do its job. I'm going to do the same with this petal, so I'm going to wet it, and now I'm going to make very sure that I do not go over this line. I'm trying to keep away from the wet areas. Even if there's a tiny bit of white gap, that's also fine. The idea is just so that this and that doesn't bleed, but these do, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to just add in my pink, so I just dab that into the top, and you see how it just floods into the paper. Now I'm going to just change the angle of my arm so that I can pull down this pink into the water. So it's very liney, the pink. There's like little veins from the flower that's running up and down, and we want to recreate that in a very soft way with this pink. Just pull it down, and then you see the yellow already just blends in. Now I'm going to do this area, and I'm going to try and not paint over these. It's going to be a little bit more detail and just take a little bit more time to paint around all of them, but it really is going to be worth it once you have done that. I'm just trying to wet my entire area again, nice and softly working around those. I get my pink, I add that in, and then I'm just going to drag that down. Now because we can't go through these areas, I lift my paintbrush and just add in a tiny bit by them, and I really try and make sure that this edge of the flower is darker than the rest, so that it looks more natural, of almost how the flower just is embracing the color more to the edges. And then I'm going to add in some yellow in these areas where you see through it, and then I'm going to jump on to this one. So this really is quite a quick paint, this specific flower. You can most definitely add more detail to the flower if you want to, but this is the look I am going for today. Just taking our time by getting those really soft fluffy edges. What you also can do is, instead of going out, drag the paintbrush inwards, and then I really want to have a little bit of a shadow over here, so I'm just going to add a little bit more paint and just dab it on there. And I also want to have one over here. We just redab, and we can do this because it's still wet. It does help to blend in while it's still wet. So these two are already dry, so we're not going to do it over there. Now I'm going to paint this petal, and there is a little bit of a difference between this one and that area, because this yellow is on the inside, so you don't see the yellow. So this entire petal is the light beautiful pink color, and I want to make this edge a little bit darker, including that one. So I'm just gonna drag my paint through the water and just get those soft edges. Now most of it bleeds out, so you don't really always see all those beautiful lines, but where you can see them, it works. And we also don't want to overdo it, so we are happy with it not being too liney. And then the outside, or the, if it folds over and you see the back again, like this petal, we're just going to make that a tiny bit darker so you can see it's a little bit further away. And I'm going to do the same with these two. I'm just waiting for that to dry. So for now I'm going to do this petal and I just water it, and once again it doesn't have the yellow on it because it's more to the inside and we don't want to show that. So I'm going to make this one a tiny bit darker than my reference, just because this petal is behind this one and we really want to see the difference between the two, so that you can almost see that there's a shadow on this one from this one. So if you do not paint specifically according to the reference, that's also fine. It does help you to have a reference, but you can always amend it. What I want to do now is just make some areas a tiny bit darker. I'm going to take my small paintbrush, I'm going to take my pink and just dilute it a tiny bit, and then I'm only going to add in the tiniest bit of paint on the tip of the paintbrush, and I'm going to drag some of the lines through, because all my lines are disappearing now and I really do want those lines. So we're just going to create a few, and we kind of follow the curve of the flower. You don't want to go in the opposite direction or have a straight line if the petal is curved, and there are more lines towards the end as towards the middle part, so you just want to keep that in mind. And then you can add in as many as you want. I would suggest not to do too many. It's still a soft look and we don't want to overdo it. Keep that in mind. And then I'm going to just do this edge and I'm going to make that darker once again so you can see that's behind. And now while this all dries, before we can go on with that one, I'm going to start with this one. So I'm going to wet this area, and we need to remember that there is yellow in the center again. So once this is wet, I'm going to go directly into this area, into this petal. So we can almost do these two petals at the same time. So give them enough water for it to be wet enough, and then I'm going to just add in my tiny bit of yellow and just drag that into all the areas where I want the yellow. And then I'm going to go in with my pink again, and I'm just going to add that to this edge, and I'll just drag that into my areas. This one is coming out a little bit darker than I expected, so I'm going to just remove some of the paint on my painting cloth, and then I can just, with the dirty paintbrush, or take a little bit more and add some lines on this side. And I want to have a little bit of a shadow over here, and then I'll just drag them out. That's all done. I'm going to do these little pink areas. So I want to make it a darker pink, and then have like a grayish color at the top. So let's get all my colors ready. We want our gray. I'll just put that in there, and then we're going to have our yellow again. So these little half circle things, the pollen is a light gray, so we're filling that in with our light gray. And then once this is dry, we can do those lines. Now that this is dry, I can go in with my pink, and I really want my nice bright pink. I'm gonna just paint that line, and I try not to paint too wet because this needs to go into our yellow. So I'm going to grab in my yellow and I paint away, come closer, paint away, go closer. So this helps them to not take over, the pink not to take over, and for it to have a good balance between the two. So for now I'm going to make this maroon color. So I want to use my purple and a tiny bit of my pink, and then I'll add black to this. So let's just first paint that in here. So this is the lighter color, and then I'm going to take my black, and I'm just going to add in my shadow underneath the flower and drag that through to this petal. So I'm just going to paint this one with my water. I'm going to add in a little bit of pink, the tiniest bit. That's too much. Let's just pick that back up. I'm going to just blend that out in the left side, and then I want to use my green on the right side. So I'm grabbing my green and I just want to get a nice soft green glow to that side. This flowers, the edges are a little bit darker than the rest, so we're going to make sure it does it justice, the nice and dark pink, and we can just repeat that on most of them. I'm going to take my smaller paintbrush for this area because it really is a tiny area. It really helps to have a smaller paintbrush, and it just gives you that advantage of not struggling with a smaller area. I'm going to just finish this petal over here, so I'm just going to wet it again, grab my green for that light fresh green, and then a light pink on the other side. So while this dries, I'm going to do my marge. I'm going to use my metallic watercolor paint, and I am just wetting the metallic. Now, because it's handmade metallic paint, it takes longer to activate, so you just take your time to activate it and make sure it's nice and pigmented. Metallic paint really does the best job when it's more pigmented. So I'm going to clean my paintbrush and dry it, and you see I do this swirly kind of motion on the cloth. It just helps to bring all the bristles together. And then I'm going to grab only a tip on the tip of the paintbrush, the paint, and I'm going to paint in the marge. You do not have to paint this. You can also just use a color pencil or a pen if you want to, if you're more comfortable with that, because it is some fine detail and it really doesn't have to be perfect. The whole idea is for this to be a creative calendar. So I'm going to take my medium paintbrush. I'm going to wet an area, so I'm going to just see, I can't paint those two together, so let me paint this one first, give it at least a bit time of drying, and then I'll add in a tiny bit of my pink and let that flow in. So I want to be able to see the difference between these two petals, so one of them should be darker at the edge, so let's just make this one a little bit darker, and then that one could be lighter, and then I can now do this area over here of the petal is also quite dark, so I'm going to add in quite a bit of pigment just to really get that bright pink through the petal. So while this all dries, I'm going to go back with my small paintbrush. I'm grabbing my pink and I'm just going to finish these lines, and we really want a little bit of paint on the paintbrush so we get those thin pollen lines, and if it's bulky it's not going to look great. And then while everything else dries, I can add in my fine lines. So now be careful not to put your hand in wet paint. So I'm going to add in a few lines that I did over there onto this one as well, just to add some detail. And I'm going to just finish it off over there, add in some lines, and these lines really doesn't have to be perfect. So if they're straight or long, it doesn't matter, the variety is better. And then we can just add in, and the drier the brush, the better the lines, in my opinion. Then it's softer and it's thinner, so that also works to your advantage. Now because they might be still wet, I'm going to go in with my tiny paintbrush so I make sure I don't flood the area. And then I'm going to go in with my darker color. I'm going to make this edge nice and crisp, and then I'm just going to drag that into the lighter areas. So now I can clearly see the difference between that and this one, which is what I wanted to achieve. And then I can go into this one, which is so tiny. So use your small paintbrush. Don't try and use your big paintbrush and then you ruin your beautiful artwork. And then I'm just going to drag that up again. We make this one a tiny bit lighter so that you can see the difference between all of this going on over here. So as long as the color is just a tiny bit different, then that's it. So this is the final artwork for March. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel.